This podcast contains sensitive topics and explicit language that may not be suitable for all listeners.
There's a video of the murder. It's silent, grainy, shot on a rainy night, black, white, and gray. Spider webs cling to the camera. It's from a guard shack at the back entrance to a Navy jet base. The camera looks down a long driveway and leads out to black. To find the murder, you have to look into that darkness, past a few reflectors, and ignore the lightning. Then you see it, a flash of light near the ground, a muzzle flash. That's it, the murder of Victor Decker.
We've stared at that footage for hours. We've manipulated it, we've studied it, we've seen the silhouettes and the shadows. The FBI did the same thing with better technology and training than we have. What happened is right in front of you, but you just can't see it. The aftermath of the killing, the investigation, the near trial, the rumors, the innuendo, that's gone on for about 7 years in a lot the same way. No one has ever been convicted of murdering Victor Decker, an off-duty cop that a lot of people called a hero. Maybe the cops are right, that they've got the killers locked up, even if it is for other crimes. Or maybe the murderer is still out there.
I'm Gary Harkeye.
I'm Joanne Kimberlin. We're reporters at the Virginian-Pilot in Norfolk, Virginia.
And this is the first episode of The Shot.
None of us felt safe anymore. I mean, this is a police officer who somebody somehow got the drop on him. Like, how does that even happen?
I don't think it was something random. I can tell you that much. I don't think it was something random. Not the way he was, feeling uneasy.
Whoever killed Victor Decker is still out there.
That sound you just heard, that's a jet from Oceana Naval Air Station. We're at the spot in Virginia Beach where Victor Decker was killed on October 26, 2010. We're standing at the mouth of a borrow pit, one of those city-run places where construction crews come to get fill. Oceana Boulevard runs between the pit and the Navy base. At night, it's a little quieter out here, just insects and a few cars. The borrow pit has a new gate. That's about the only thing that's changed. It's one of those metal pole gates, like the one that used to be here, but this one is set back a little more and it's bigger. It's a lot harder to walk around it like Decker apparently did that night. The guard shack at the base, the one where the video was filmed, it's right across Oceana Boulevard. It's about 100 yards away, and it's hard to even see it at night. The woods around the pit are really thick. It's mostly pine trees and brush. You don't have to go far inside the entrance to feel secluded. Decker's murder is our area's only unsolved cop killing. He was just 25 when he was shot just inside this gate. The pistol was jammed so hard against his skull it left its own bruise. He was facing his killer, and it looks like he was on his knees. I started thinking, well, on the way here, that are we stupid coming out here? Somebody got murdered out here, and
Yeah, I was
what if it really was just a random robbery, and this is just a good place to kill somebody?
I met Victor in middle school.
That's Dawn, Decker's wife. He'd become a father just 8 months before he died, a baby girl named Charlotte.
We weren't in the same grade. He was one grade behind me, but I just remember this blonde-haired kid walking up to me, and he introduced himself, and he's like, "I'm Victor Decker. I can put my whole fist in my mouth. Do you want to see?"
Victor and Dawn reconnected after high school. They fell in love and moved in together. 2.5 years later, they got married. When we first contacted Dawn, we weren't sure how she would respond. We knew things could get messy. But throughout the reporting process, Dawn has stuck with us. She's made it clear what she cares most about is finding out who killed her husband.
And I've asked, can somebody else look at this? It shouldn't be almost 7 years. And I feel like I did the day I was notified, with no answers. His family shouldn't be like that.
Decker was born around here in Hampton Roads. If you look at a map of Virginia with the southeasternmost corner, people from up north think of it as the south, and people from the south think of it as the north. It's got a lot of military, a lot of sun, and a lot of traffic. Decker went to Bayside High School in Virginia Beach. He's got a sister and a brother and 2 half-brothers. His dad ran his own small aviation company. Decker was short, only 5'5", but he was strong and athletic. He wrestled and swam in high school, got a criminal justice degree from Tidewater Community College. Now, when did he go to work as a Norfolk police officer?
Actually, while we were dating, he started with the Norfolk Police Department in October of 2006 and graduated from the academy in April of 2007. Pretty much throughout high school, the only thing he ever talked about was either joining the Army or becoming a police officer. So it wasn't really a surprise.
Norfolk is next to Virginia Beach. Decker was on the city's force for 4 years, mostly on bike patrol at night downtown.
He was an extremely capable police officer, and he had what I would call emotional maturity.
That's Joe Barron, now sheriff in Norfolk. Back in 2009, he was a lieutenant in the department and in charge of the city's downtown patrol officers.
He was someone who didn't gripe a lot about anything and just did exactly what you needed him to do. He never had any issues with ever handling minor arrest and major arrest. He was always just the first one to jump up and say, "Oh, I got this."
Norfolk was a little seedier back then, a little rougher. More bars and clubs than restaurants and condos. Decker would stop at all the bars, talking to the owners and the bouncers and the servers, just to make sure everything was all right. Jamie Colson owned Time Lounge on Granby Street. Granby is the main drag through downtown.
If there was a patron that we couldn't get to leave our area, he would just come down and sort of make his presence known and let them know, you know, you need to walk. I never saw an abuse of any of that.
Colston remembers Decker as one of the bike cops you could always get in touch with.
But when he came around, you know, he gave you an option. Many times, which Norfolk cops do in general. They're pretty good about it, like doing their best before they put you in cuffs, you know. Mm-hmm. And he always gave you an opportunity to kind of straighten up and take a hike. You didn't want to make him mad, you know. He'd do the same thing to you.
Yeah.
You know, he'd reprimand you.
Bro cop, that's what club and restaurant workers call cops like Decker. Here's Gabby White, who's worked the local late night scene for years.
He was just that guy that looked out for people. You know, whenever the waitresses or any staff would get off, and you know, he would go beyond his badge and just like walk them to their cars or something. You know, make sure that they got to where they were going safely. He just looked out. You know,
He wasn't a big guy.
he wasn't, but he was big in heart, and that's what mattered, I guess.
The first time I met him was just after I got promoted in April of 2008.
Daryl Howard is the Norfolk Police Assistant Chief. At the time, he was the sergeant in charge of the downtown bike cops.
We had our first roll call, and that was where I introduced myself to everybody on the platoon and met them for the very first time. And I looked at him with his blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, and I told him, I said, "You're going to be the one I'm going to call Cutie," just because he just had that look about himself. And the guys were all in their early to mid-20s. So I kind of felt like their father. With Victor especially, his personality was just, it was funny, but yet it was almost addicting, because I can remember a few times where, you know, I'd be out there dealing with somebody and, you know, things were starting to get heated and I can feel somebody pulling on the back of my shirt and there was Victor pulling me back. Sarge, I got this. You know, it's funny because people, even now, when we talk about Victor, people always bring up the fact, yeah, you know, I still remember Victor riding that bike down Granby Street, and that's what he was known for. He was a true bike officer. He really was, and he's missed.
About 2 months before Victor and Dawn's wedding, he did something most cops never have to do. He used his gun. It was March 19th, 2009. It was after midnight. Marlon Sanders and Brighton Alderman were walking around downtown Norfolk looking for someone to rob. They were both 19. They'd been charged in a couple of shooting cases, but they were out on bond. Sanders had a pistol and 2 knives. That night's victim, a man in a parked car on Bank Street. Sanders shot him twice, killed him, then the two took off. Decker heard the shots. He called for backup and started pedaling. He caught up with Sanders and Alderman about a block away from their crime. He jumped off his bike, yelling at them to get down and drop the gun. Alderman hit the pavement, but Sanders started shooting at Decker. So Decker shot back, killing Sanders. Then he handcuffed Alderman. It was a close call for Decker. One of Sanders' bullets hit his bike.
You never know what elements are in play when something like that happens. Was it the fear of the second suspect where, you know, he gave up quickly, or was it pure luck that Victor didn't get hit when the suspect fired at him? No one ever knows, but, you know, I know that he handled himself with extreme courage in a very hot situation.
Here I get this phone call. I'm okay. I was involved in a shooting. I'll call you later. I don't know what to say to this. So I called my family to let them know. And then he came home, and I didn't really get a lot of information at that point. The answer I got was, every day above ground is a great day. Today just happens to be an exceptional day. So I kind of left it alone and figured he would talk to me when he wanted to, and I actually didn't find out the actual whole story of the shooting until right before Charlotte was born at one of the award ceremonies.
The shootout made Decker a local celebrity. Awards poured in, lots of pats on the back. He was named Norfolk's Officer of the Year. Even the governor gave him a medal. There's a photo of Decker posing with a big plaque for valor. He's got a huge grin on his face. It almost looks like a high school picture except for the police uniform. But Sheriff Barron says Decker didn't let it all go to his head.
Do you remember how he handled that? How he handled those accolades and that notoriety?
Yeah, he was very humble. He and his wife would come to the ceremonies, and you know, he'd just like smile, and it didn't seem to change him, his work habits, or change anything about his personality after that.
You could still send him to the parking garages?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. That was one of our biggest issues downtown, is
really?
Car break-ins in the parking garages back then. So, you know, I sent a lot of officers into the parking garages.
Michael Muhammad, a local community activist, attended one of the events where Decker was honored. Muhammad is someone who knows just about everyone in the city, from street kids to the mayor. He'd heard of Decker before the downtown shootout. In 2008, Decker arrested Marcus Vick, a younger brother of former NFL superstar Michael Vick, for a DUI. Muhammad is often on the outs with the establishment. He sees himself as a voice for the black community.
I remember being at the State of the City address in 2010 given by then Mayor Paul Frame, where with a room of over 1,000 people present, Victor Decker was honored by Town Bank for his in the line of duty kill of the young man downtown. And it struck me as odd because out of a room of over 1,000 people, I was the only one that when they stood to applaud him, I did not. And in the immediacy of my thought, I was like, I wondered how maybe Mr. Decker's family could handle the loss of a life and the thought that someone would applaud that loss no matter what the circumstances were.
Charlotte was born the next spring, in February of 2010.
And it was our first wedding anniversary, so it was a little hard. I mean, here comes Charlotte almost 10 months after we got married, and then our first anniversary comes around, and she wasn't having anything to do with being with anyone but me. So, but it was different, you know, new parents, new anxieties, and him working at night and me working during the day. It was kind of trying to find that balance of how do we stay husband and wife as well as mom and dad with a new child. But no, he loved it. The first thing he did every day was, you know, come in and check on her, and then I would still be asleep, so he'd come and kiss me good morning and crawl into bed.
So he pretty much always worked. He was on the night shift pretty much always?
Pretty much from the moment he joined the police department. He liked night shift. It's what he thrived on. He just felt like he was more of a night person than a day person.
In mid-October, the couple had a Christian dedication ceremony for Charlotte. A week later, Dawn went to visit her grandparents in Atlanta. She wanted them to meet Charlotte.
My grandfather has been ill off and on oxygen, so I wanted to go down, but we couldn't afford 2 tickets for the 3 of us to fly. In the morning of my flight, I had the certificate of her dedication, and I was like, I'm not getting on this plane until you sign it. I was absolutely demanding that he sign that certificate before I get on the plane. Couldn't tell you why. Don't know why it was so important to me at that point.
So on October 25th, 2010, with his wife out of town, Decker found himself with some freedom on his hands. One of his friends, a bartender everyone called Bobby the Greek, invited him to a club called Atlantis out near the jet base. The club has a new name now, but the scene is pretty much the same. Cinder block, no windows, women working a stripper pole in thong bikinis while men toss dollar bills onto the stage. Full nudity isn't allowed in Virginia Beach, so it's the closest thing we've got to a strip club. Anyway, on the night Decker was there, Atlantis was holding a fundraiser. Part of the proceeds were going to breast cancer. So after the murder, news outlets, including our own, basically referred to Decker's night out as just that. He was at a fundraiser, which actually sounds kind of sweet. But the only difference between that night and a regular night at Atlantis was the dancers were doing their grinding in pink thong bikinis. No one seems to remember Decker ever going to Atlantis before. That night might have been the only time he was ever there. But Colston says the bar was a regular stop for the downtown Norfolk crowd, even though it's a drive for them, nearly 20 miles.
I do know, at that time, it was a common spot. It was almost like a regular bar. You went here, you went here, oh, we went out to whatever, and then we went somewhere else,
Wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like...
To me, it wasn't a big deal that he was there.
That evening, Victor texted Dawn asking if it was okay with her if he went.
And of course I told him, don't do anything I wouldn't do, and kind of laughed it off and said, have a good time. He kind of was like, I don't know if I should go out. This doesn't feel right. And I said, no, we're not home. You never go out. You're always working. Go have a good time. When's the next time you're going to get to go out? Your birthday in like May. So I kind of pushed him to go out, and I didn't actually know it would end that way.
Decker stopped at another bar first, a place called Central 111. Gabby White was working there. She says he came in about 10 o'clock.
It was his first time going out since he became a dad, and actually I think since his wife got pregnant, if memory serves me correctly. And he just kept fidgeting with his shirt. He's like, do I look okay? I don't know. He's like, I kind of just want to be at home, but my wife and kid are out of town. And he's like, and Bobby invited me out, and it's for a good cause. But he was so nervous. And
just nervous about being out?
Yeah, because he hadn't been out in a while, and I still remember he ordered a cherry Coke. He ordered a cherry Coke from me, and I was like, yeah, he hasn't been out in a while.
Decker showed up at Atlantis about 10:30 that night, dressed in black. He met Bobby the Greek and a couple of other friends inside. Here's Matt Waters, who knew Decker from the downtown scene. He was working as a bouncer at Atlantis that night. The two talked off and on.
In the course of talking to him, he was saying that he felt, uneasy, and I'm assuming that was to do with the death threats that he'd been getting. That he didn't say exactly to me that he was getting death threats, but I had heard that from other people that knew him, and that was why his family was down either Atlanta or Savannah, somewhere that he basically wanted them to go, somewhere where his wife's family was, and that he was on leave.
Did you hear that? So you had heard that before that night?
I'd heard that maybe earlier that night, or night before, or something like that.
Dawn says she never heard anything about her husband getting death threats, and that was not why she was in Atlanta. But Waters says Decker was nervous about being unarmed. Cops rarely go anywhere without some kind of firearm. But weapons weren't allowed inside the club. There was a pat down at the door. Decker had left his handgun in his truck.
I remember thinking to myself, that I wanted to go ahead and tell him to go outside and get his, and then I'd just make sure I'd be the one to pat him down, and I'd just overlook it.
Get his gun.
I wish that I had done that.
Several people who were there said Decker had some odd run-ins. That night was amateur night, with amateur dancers competing for a cash prize, a few $100. The girls bring entourages to cheer them on, and it fills the place up, but it's a rougher crowd than the regulars. Fights break out sometimes.
I remember there was two guys. One I'm quite sure was wearing a fur coat. The other one I can't really remember. Came up and asked him something along the lines of, "You got any white?" or "You know where I can get some white?" or something like that. And Decker's response was, "Nah, I don't," or "I don't know what you're talking about. Keep on moving. Move along," something like that. And I just remember just laughing it off. They don't even know who he is, what he does. But it sort of stuck out in my mind, just for the whole fur coat thing,
Can you describe those two kind of in a little more detail? Like, what did they look like?
African American, the one with the coat, the one that I'm sure had a coat on was sort of taller, thinner build. I would say late 30s maybe. Not really a beard, but sort of unshaven. Had some glasses on. He was trying to look like a pimp from what I remember.
Getting back to one thing you mentioned about them saying the white and basically implying that he was, asking him if he had any cocaine. You had never known him to take cocaine or anything. Like, can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, you known him as basically a pretty straight-laced guy.
He was straight. As far as I knew him. Before that night, I had always seen him when he's always in uniform. The way he acted when he's in uniform, he's not the type of person that would do that I could tell. Seeing how he reacted, stuff like that, working in the clubs and stuff like that, I was around it so much. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get, one of those little folded up dollar footballs when I was working in a gentleman's club, full of cocaine that they flick up on the stage, try and get a dancer hooked. You're around it so much that, and the club owners doing it, stuff like that, you get to see tendencies, you get to spot it. And I bet you I could spot it better than your average police officer could, to be honest with you, just because, people act a little bit different when they see someone in uniform like that, rather than just seeing a bouncer or something like that. They're a little bit more relaxed on how they act about it. And I didn't see any of that from him.
At one point, Decker left to give a friend a ride to another club. When he got back, the parking lot was full. Cars were parked up and down the grassy shoulder of Oceana Boulevard. Decker was in a beat-up two-tone 1995 Ford F-150. He parked about a football field down the road, just to the right of the borrow pit. For most of the night, it sounds like Decker stayed low-key. He's not in any of the photos taken at the club. People say he spent most of his time at the bar. He gave a shoulder massage to one of the professional dancers, Sarah X. She's in Vegas now, where she's made a name for herself as a boob twerker. Yeah, it's a real thing. Google her. Last call was about 1:45 a.m. Before he left, Decker made plans to go out for a bite to eat. He walked a couple of the dancers to their cars. By the time he headed for his pickup down by the borrow pit, the shoulder was almost deserted.
I'm going to bring up the video if you want to see it.
I think you've shown it to me. It's
really
grainy and hard to see.
It's totally grainy. It's like super hard to see.
We're watching the guard shack video. Some other reporters are watching it with us. It's blown up on a projector screen in the newsroom. That helps, but not enough. It's really frustrating what you just can't see. But as the timestamp rolls towards 2 a.m., it hits you. Victor Decker is out there. He's walking away from the club, down that shoulder, in the rain, into the silence of this black and white video.
Hey, Joanne.
Yeah.
Bring that timeline in here.
We have a timeline from the FBI lab that analyzed the video. We click frame by frame and freeze where the FBI made notes. Like this one, 1:55 and 54 seconds. Dome cargo light on victim's truck lit.
See, there's the lights on.
It's barely a flicker. Maybe Decker was opening the passenger door of his pickup. That's the side he would have walked up to first. Maybe he got something out, like his handgun. Over the next minute, those same lights in Decker's truck go on and off a couple more times. Then 6 minutes pass with no signs from Decker. A handful of cars pull out from the shoulder near where he was parked. A few people walk through the image. You can't really see them, but they pass in front of reflectors on the borrow pit gate.
Okay, so 1:59:45, this car, I'm not going to rewind it, but this car comes over, and it just stops here, kind of like looks at his truck, and then off it goes.
Maybe somebody leaving the club who
notices his truck.
But he's still alive at this point.
Right.
2 minutes later, the FBI notes a flash of light, 1/30th of a second, in the vicinity of the southernmost gate post.
So at 2:02:43, 2:02:43 is the kill shot.
Man, that shot is fast.
It's like a shooting star.
7 seconds later, lights flare on a vehicle that's parked nearby. It pulls out. Other cars drive innocently past.
It is like somebody opens a car door and then flips on their lights real quick.
Or maybe you're sitting in the dark and you've just started your car.
Yeah.
You step on the brake when you do that generally.
Yeah.
But they call them brake lights / tail lights, or tail brake lights.
Oh, those are brake lights?
They don't know. They just say tail / brake lights lit on suspect vehicle north of victim.
Wow, someone just drove right past the murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking body just bleeding out.
Yeah.
Coming up on The Shot.
He was one of the last few people out. I was in there helping clean up. The music was off. We heard no shot at all.
Decker's body was found around 7:15 this morning by a man driving north along Oceana Boulevard.
Do you feel like the real killer is still out there?
I really wonder. I really highly wonder if the person that actually did this has been free this entire time.
If you'd like to see the security video yourself, you can find it at pilotonline.com/theshot. Keep in mind, it's grainy and hard to see. We've got a graphic that walks you through it. The Shot was produced by Randy Greenwell and edited by Bill Henry, with special help from Josh Davidsburg. Music is by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. WTKR contributed TV news clips. Will Halp is our digital graphics editor. For graphics, photos, and more, go to pilotonline.com/theshot.
Special thanks to Sarah Hutchins from Investigative Reporters and Editors. She gave us a lot of good advice and even came up with the title of this podcast. Also thanks to Tim Eberly, Veronica Gonzalez, Bill Henry, and Jane Harper, who watched the video with us and let us record their reactions.
Sources for this podcast include documents and other materials found in court records or obtained by the pilot from credible sources who wish to remain anonymous.